Hello everyone. So today's video is going to be on creating a panorama. We have already spoken about converting to black and white as well as using adjustment brushes. Um, but the purpose of the assignment that you will get with all of this content is to create a black and white converted panorama that includes adjustment brushes as well. Now, there's been several different ways over the years to complete this, and most recently I discovered that there's a much easier way, as the people behind the scenes at Adobe are always working towards making things easier and as easy as possible. So there can be multiple ways of doing things, and there certainly can always be new and updated way of doing things as well. So with that said, I went out and I shot some images at the lock in downtown Peterborough. And I used a tripod to make sure that my focal point was set. The plane in which I was moving the camera was consistent, and I was working with as many consistence as possible, or as much consistency as possible, rather, so that I could have a successful panorama. Now, it's important that you do follow all of those steps that we mentioned in the PowerPoint so that it sets this panorama up for success. And another thing from experience that I know is just watching out with any lines that you may have in your image. I've done a panorama before one time with a lot of power lines in it, and there were dozens and dozens of hydro poles and power lines that went through it, and that caused some problems when I was trying to line everything up. So just bear in mind with things that might get overly complicated in your image, as well as I had to remember when I was shooting this to wait for, this is a fairly busy street, so wait for a time that I could take this image where there was no traffic. These are also trails, as you can see, and it's a really nice day out today, so there are a lot of people out and about. So I just didn't want to take too long and all of a sudden have the same person in each individual shot at different points. So again, just throwing back to that idea of consistency. So first and foremost, when you are creating a panorama, obviously we've shot in RAW, and that's just to make sure that we have as much information in these images as possible. And so I've shot 5 images. You can see many of which do in fact overlap quite a bit, but perhaps show a little bit more in a different direction. So I have 5 images here to work with. I'm going to make sure that I highlight all of them. So I'm Command A, I'm going to right click and open in Camera Raw. And now on my left hand side I've got the film strip with all of these images that I highlighted. So first and foremost, in another direction, we might start doing our global edits first. But for this particular case scenario, I've discovered that we can actually go ahead and create the panorama first. So we need to highlight all of the images that we have brought in to work on here, and Command A by selecting all will do that just fine. We'll go up to the very top, and we see that by hovering over the images we have all of these options. So we could sync the edits if we had any. We could save them all right now just as JPEGs, and then the 3 dots here will allow us to have more options. Down near the bottom we have one called Merge to Panorama. We don't want to merge to HD Panorama at this time because in order to have an HD, we need multiple exposed images, meaning that this particular image we're looking at now would have to be the correct exposure, a little bit higher in exposure, and a little bit lower in exposure for us to create an HDR. And now we haven't set that up, and our goal simply is to create a panorama. So we can see the shortcut here is Command M. We're going to go to Merge Panorama, and right away it has gone ahead and merged all of this information for us. Now there's several different ways in which the projection can be listed. So spherical is usually the one that we're going to pick. Um, we can see what these different options do for us. Now granted, this particular uh, processing that we're doing is actually very labor intensive on our computer, so keep that in mind. I actually have far too many things open, I think, for the amount of work that is being processed. So just keep that in mind for you. It will tell you if perhaps one projection won't work, so obviously perspective is not for us. And I think that spherical was kind of more true to the actual frames that we shot, so I'm gonna go ahead and click that. Um, Boundary warp, let's see what this goes ahead and does for us, if anything. We can see that as we went ahead and made the images merge, that it has helped a lot with any kind of distortion that may have occurred due to the frames. First of all, I did shoot on a wider angle lens, um, and you can see that there could in fact be some um, distortion. But for the most part, what this does help do as well is flatten that out and fill in any information that was left out so that we don't actually have to go ahead and crop. Now, if for whatever reason this boundary warp has made your image not look very appealing, perhaps it has gone ahead and warped some things that are around the edges, we could try to see what fill edges might do. And I can see that that's done a great job in guessing what might go to fill in these edges. Now, for me, so if I click that off and I try this boundary warp again, I actually think that this is filling it in very nicely, and it doesn't look like everything is warping or skewing too badly here. So why don't I boost up this boundary warp? 70 looks good to me, and hit fill edges. So we've got virtually the best of both worlds here. As soon as this goes ahead and finishes its calculations, and there we go. So it looks a little fuzzy at the moment, but it's just it rendering the image for us. Perfect. And that should, there we go. Awesome. So I think this image looks fantastic. This is all 5 images, all merged into one to create this panorama. And if you've never been to Peterborough, this is the loch that everybody talks about quite a bit. There's tons of really cool events that happen here every year. And as I mentioned, there are trails that go along this way. And it is a photographer's dream because unfortunately I've missed it here, but these trees are all stunning colors in the fall. So if you ever find yourself up this way, this is a great little area to check out. So with that said, let's get back to our merge here. Down at the bottom, we've got our merge button. We're going to go ahead and click merge. And now this is just saying, where am I going to be saving this image to? Now it will save as a DNG, and we know that DNGs are raw files. They're just a different way of the file extension being what it is. So a DNG is perfect. And right now, just for the sake of argument, you would change this name of the file here to be something that's better suited for your image. I'm just going to leave this for the time being, just so I can show you what we're going to do next. So once we have our image file name, sorry, we're going to hit save. And now this is opened back up into our camera raw. So we can see that the images that we created this panorama from are still here, but in this case, I actually want to just go ahead and edit the panorama. So now we can go ahead and do all of our global edits. Now it's gone ahead and applied some global edits here for whatever reason, but I don't actually want to have the auto done. So I'm going to click that off. I want to be in charge of everything to do with my photo. So with that said, because our ultimate goal is to have a black and white panorama, we're going to start off with converting to black and white. So we're going to toggle that on here. And if you haven't watched the other black and white conversion, I'm just going to fly through this part. So if you haven't watched that, please at some point go back and watch that so it can fill in any gaps. That should be important, an important step to this, an important step to this assignment that you have been assigned. So I'm going to pick here an area that I think will work for my white balance. And we know that even though things are black and white, the white balance can still play a big role in your image. So I'm just going to go ahead and play around with that for a second here and make sure it looks good. And then I'm going to fly through these options here, and my main goal is that the locks are in fact in proper exposure, and we can always fix everything as we go. There is a lot of dark area in the image, and that is okay. So we can always use adjustment brushes as well to get where we want to go. So there's no dehaze or no fog, and etc. I'm going to leave that. Put that on and off. Looks pretty good. Curves. We know that's part of our global edits. So I'm going to go ahead and finish these off here. Got our darks. I might pump my darks up a touch. Shadows, and pump the shadows just a little bit there. And on and off. Definitely an improvement. Detail, I know I want to sharpen this quite a bit, so I'm going to pump that right up using my alter option, just to see where this is at. Masking, perfect. Now I can see that my mouse is still an eyedropper, so I'm going to go ahead and deselect that. And I just want to move in here and just see, there's really no overwhelming noise in this image that I'm concerned about. Everything looks pretty good, I'd say. Okay, so I don't think that I need to apply any noise reduction, and that's quite fine. Color noise reduction is there as default, and that's fine as well. Now coming down to our color mixer, when it's black and white, we know that it is the black and white mixer, and of course we know that each of these sliders will attack the luminosity of the colors present. Now this is a great way that I can continue to shape what my end goal is here, and as I mentioned a little while ago, that my priority is the locks in the back. I feel like that's probably what you're going to look at the most. And on off. Perfect. That's a great way. We've used these leading lines right to the lock in the back. Okay, so before, after, excellent. I might actually go ahead and just pump that contrast up even more. And I think that is, on paper, that looks far, far too much with plus 47, but I'm really just looking at what that has achieved for us. And I think that that is a huge, huge difference. Now, okay, before in our black and white conversion with the adjustment brushes, we also talked about the adjustment brushes. So why the heck not? Let's throw some in on this image here. So adjustment brush shortcut is K, and I'm just going to fly through this because we have that other video that explains what and how these work exactly. And sometimes I use a slider in a way that I know I'm not going to use it at the end of the day, but just enough so that I can see right away what I'm doing. And then I'll go ahead and slide back on that. For this particular brush that I've placed here, I knew that my intent was to darken down the sky a little bit, and that looks good. So I'm actually going to go in here and I'm going to see if oh, it's too much. So let's drop this. Still too much. I'm going to feather that out too. Drop this even more. I just don't want to make it as harsh as it looks. I just want it enough that it frames the locks a little bit more. So all I did was just lighten some of this area up that I otherwise had brushed in at that time. So that looks good to me. I'm going to use another brush and I'm going to lighten up this area here. So I'm just going to go and revert these sliders back. I'm going to pump that. I know already that's going to be too much, but actually it doesn't look terrible. But I am going to scale it back a little bit. And why don't I pump up some of the whites so it adds a little bit more contrast. Happens here if I bump shadows a little, and to keep that contrast bump down. Perfect. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. Now this area looks a little bit too light to me, so I'm going to darken that by using an additional brush. And I'm going to lower the brush size. And I want to make sure that I reset my brushes for it's really just this foreground area that I'm most concerned about. Maybe that road can use a little darkening also. Okay. And I know, again, that's a little too much, so I'm going to back that off some. I'm going to bring highlights down some. I'm going to add more blacks. And I can see maybe I missed a spot here, so go like that. Perfect. That looks pretty good. So I think I'm going to add one more brush and do these here. And I'm going to bump up the sharpness. And I'm going to do that just in the center here where I'm most interested in that leading line all the way to my lock in the back. I'm going to even pump up some of the texture. Maybe a little more than that. Maybe, what does the clarity do here? Clarity looks not bad at all with that. The texture that's in the stream and the water, as well as I love what it does to that tree there too. So that looks fantastic. And I think that for this particular image, the 4 different adjustment brushes have done a wonderful job here. All right, so I'm going to flip back here. I'm going to show the before and the after. I mean, I don't hate the color version at all, but being that our objective was a black and white panoramic landscape image with adjustment brushes, I think we've done pretty darn good. So the last thing to do here, because if I just hit done, that saves an XMP file with all of my information. I'm going to go into, so this is already highlighted, so we'll go to save up here. We can pick an area that it is saved. Format JPEG, quality 12, color space is good. I don't want to resize. I want to make sure that this is 300 pixels per inch, however. And sharpen for screen at standard is quite fine. I'm going to save that. It's going to show me it's saving down here. And as soon as that's done, we can hit done, and that will have saved our global edits to our raw image in our XMP file. All right, so let's have a look. So bridge here shows us that there are edits that are in our XMP file. I know before we went ahead and toggled that on and off, or toggled that on, so we should be able to see any XMP files if we did have that. Now just if I double click this to open it up and double check, I can see already I definitely have all of those global edits. Awesome. So I mean I didn't do anything, I'm just going to hit cancel. Just wanted to show you guys that that has in fact been completed. And now I've got this JPEG also. Once that loads a little better, you should be able to see that a little less. Perhaps in this preview screen it won't show us the full rendered version, but as you can see here, we have gone ahead and done that panorama. So that is the lesson on panoramas. At any point in time, if I went too fast, that's quite fine. You guys can just go back to the part that you need. Feel free to hit pause whenever, and good luck with your assignments.